I've thought about you a lot, Tear. Jade continued, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. After you left, I tried to move on, but I never really could. No one has ever made me feel the way you did. Tear's breath caught in her throat. His words echoed the thoughts she had kept buried for years, the ones she didn't dare admit to herself. She had never found anyone who compared to Jade, never allowed anyone to get close enough. But hearing him say it out loud made it all feel so much more real. Her heart ached with the weight of their unspoken past, but before she could respond, Jade's expression changed. There was a heaviness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Tear, I need to tell you something, he said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. I'm engaged. The words hit her like a blow. Tear's mind raced, trying to process what he had just said. She blinked, feeling her stomach drop as the reality of his confession settled in. Jade was engaged. To Amaka, he added, seeing her confusion. A childhood friend. We've known each other for years. Tear sat frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had heard about Amaka before. Jade had mentioned her in passing during their university days, but she had never imagined this. Engaged, Tear finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Jade nodded, his expression torn. We got engaged about 6 months ago. My family has always been close with hers, and, well, we've known each other forever. I didn't want to hurt her, but... Tear could barely hear the rest of his sentence. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and pain. Why had he come here if he was engaged? Why had he stirred up all these old feelings if he was planning to marry someone else? But what, Jade? She asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Why are you telling me this now? Jade leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table as if he were trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. Because I had to see you, Tear. I had to know if there was still something between us, if we were still us. Tear's heart clenched. There it was, the question she had been avoiding for years. Could they still be the couple they once were, despite everything that had happened? Despite the distance, the time apart, and now his engagement? She looked into his eyes, the same eyes that had once been her whole world, and she felt the pull of everything they had shared. The memories of their time together, the dreams they had once had, and the love that had never truly gone away. But then, the reality of the situation hit her. He was engaged to another woman. A woman who probably loved him as much as she once had. A woman who had been there when she couldn't be. Could she really be the one to come between that? Tara took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she tried to steady herself. Jade, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Jade said quickly, his voice thick with emotion. I just needed you to know. I needed to see you again to see if what we had was still there. Tara shook her head, her thoughts swirling in a storm of confusion. She had imagined this moment for years, but it was nothing like she had expected. How could she have imagined the depth of this choice, the complexity of what lay between them now? Jade, you're getting married, she whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. You've moved on with your life. You're with someone else now. Jade ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his expression. I haven't moved on, Tear. That's the problem. I thought I could, but I haven't. Tear's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to believe him, wanted to reach across the table and take his hand to tell him that she felt the same way. But something held her back. She couldn't ignore the fact that he had made a commitment to someone else, someone who wasn't her. I don't know if I can do this, Jade, she finally said, her voice trembling with emotion. I don't know if I can come between you and Amaka. Jade looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of longing and regret. Tara, I don't want to hurt anyone, but I can't ignore how I feel. I still love you. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their past and the uncertainty of their future. Tara felt her heart break all over again. She had waited so long to hear him say those words, but now that he had, they only made things more complicated. She wanted to believe that love was enough, that they could find their way back to each other, but life wasn't that simple. People had changed, and choices had been made. I need time, Tara said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to think." Jade nodded, his expression somber. "Take all the time you need, Ter. I'm not going anywhere." As they left the cafe and went their separate ways, Ter's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She had no idea what she was going to do, but one thing was clear. Seeing Jade again had reignited something inside her that she hadn't felt in years. Whether that was a blessing or a curse, only time would tell. For days after their meeting, Tari's thoughts were consumed by Jade's presence, his words, and the rekindled feeling she had tried to suppress for years. His confession had shaken her, awakening emotions she had long believed were buried. Jade still loved her, and despite the years that had passed, their connection remained undeniable. It felt as though fate had brought him back into her life, offering a second chance at the love they once shared. But life was more complicated now. Amaka wasn't just some name in the distance. She was real, and she was Jade's fiancée. Tari had never met her, but the thought of another woman loving Jade as much as she once did sent a pang of guilt and pain through her heart. Could she truly be the one to come between them? Could she live with herself if she became the cause of someone else's heartbreak? Jade had reached out several times after their meeting, desperate to talk, to explain. Tari had avoided his calls, knowing she wasn't ready to face the gravity of the situation. But eventually, the weight of it all became too much. She agreed to meet him again, this time at her apartment, where they could speak in private, away from the distractions of the outside world. As soon as Jade stepped through the door, the intensity between them was palpable. Tari had barely closed the door when Jade spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "Tari, I can't stop thinking about you. I can't keep pretending like everything is okay when it's not," Jade began, his eyes pleading with her to understand. "I'm engaged to Amaka, yes, but I'm not in love with her. Not the way I'm in love with you." Tari swallowed hard, the words cutting through her like a knife. She knew how deeply Jade felt about her. She felt the same. But that didn't make their situation any less complicated. She motioned for him to sit down, trying to gather her thoughts before responding. "Jade," she started, her voice soft but firm, "I never expected this. I never expected to see you again, much less to hear you say these things. I still have feelings for you too, but this isn't just about us anymore. You're engaged." "I'll call it off," Jade interrupted, his voice resolute. "I'll end things with Amaka. It's not fair to her either. I can't marry her knowing I'm in love with someone else." Ter's heart skipped a beat, her emotions swirling in a chaotic mix of hope and dread. For a brief moment, she let herself imagine it, Jade calling off the engagement, choosing her, and them finding their way back to each other. But the moment was fleeting, and reality soon came crashing down around her. She shook her head, her eyes filling with unshed tears. "You can't just leave Amaka like that, Jade. She's been in your life all this time. She's planning to spend her future with you. I can't be the reason you break her heart." Jade reached for her hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through her body. "Ter, it's not about her. It's about us. We were meant to be together. I've known that ever since you left. I can't marry Amaka knowing my heart belongs to you." Ter pulled her hand away gently, her eyes brimming with sorrow. "But Jade, I'm not the same person I was back then, and you're not either. We've both changed, and so has life. You've made commitments. You're about to get married. What we had, it's in the past." Jade's expression was one of desperation, his voice cracking as he spoke. "It doesn't have to be in the past. We can make this work. I know we can." Ter's heart broke for him, for both of them. She wanted to believe that love could conquer everything, that they could somehow rewrite their story. But she knew that wasn't how life worked. Some decisions couldn't be undone, and some loves, no matter how powerful, had to be let go. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she stood up, her voice trembling with emotion. "Jade, I love you. I always have, but this isn't right. You have to honor your commitment to Amaka. She doesn't deserve to be hurt like this." Jade stood as well, his hands reaching out to her, but Taya stepped back, shaking her head. "No, Jade, we can't do this." For a long moment, they stood there, the silence heavy with the weight of their unspoken love. Jade's eyes were filled with pain, but there was also a deep understanding. He knew what Taya was saying was true, even if it tore him apart to admit it. "I don't want to lose you again," Jade whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. Taya's heart shattered at the sight of him so vulnerable, but she knew this was the right thing to do. "You'll always be in my heart, Jade," she said softly. "But some loves aren't meant to last forever." With that, she turned away, her shoulders shaking as she held back sobs. Jade stood there for a moment longer, his heart heavy with regret and sorrow, before finally walking toward the door. He paused briefly, glancing back at her one last time, as if hoping she might change her mind. But Taya didn't look back. She stood still, tears streaming down her face, knowing that this was the hardest but most honorable decision she could make. When Jade finally left, closing the door quietly behind him, Taya felt a crushing sense of loss. The love of her life had just walked out of her apartment, and possibly her life for good. But deep down, she knew it was the right choice. Some loves, no matter how deep or passionate, had to be left in the past. After their tearful parting, Jade returned to Lagos with a heavy heart, carrying the weight of his unresolved feelings for Tari. Yet, as the days passed, he began to reflect deeply on the decision he had made. Marrying Amaka wasn't just about fulfilling a commitment, but about embracing the present, the life he had built with her. Amaka had been a constant in his life, offering love, support, and companionship during the years when Taya was thousands of miles away. She deserved his full heart, not the fragmented pieces still clinging to the past. On his wedding day, as he stood at the altar beside Amaka, Jade felt a profound sense of peace. He realized that life wasn't always about chasing lost loves or what could have been. It was about making choices in the present and finding happiness in the here and now. By marrying Amaka, he was choosing loyalty and the life they had built together. He knew it was the right decision. Meanwhile, in Toronto, Tari's heart had also begun to heal. She had faced the hardest decision of her life by letting Jade go. But she now realized that, in doing so, she had given him the greatest gift she could offer: freedom to move forward. Over time, she opened her heart to new possibilities. She threw herself into her work, traveled to new places, and built a rich life filled with friends, passion, and purpose. Though the love she had for Jade would always be a cherished memory, she no longer felt tethered to it. One day, as she walked through the bustling streets of Toronto, Tara reflected on everything she had been through. She no longer felt the ache of regret or the sorrow of what was lost. Instead, she understood that true love wasn't about holding on forever. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting go, allowing the people you care about to move forward and find their own paths. Years later, Tara met someone new, someone who loved her for who she had become. This time, she felt ready to build something real, free of the past and full of hope for the future. Jade, too, found peace in his marriage to Amaka, learning to appreciate the life they shared and the love that had grown between them. In the end, both Jade and Terry realized that love isn't just about passion or chasing dreams from the past. It's about making the right choices in the present, honoring the people who stand by your side, and finding contentment in the lives you build together. True love isn't always about holding on, but about knowing when to let go and trusting that what's meant to be will find its way. The story of Jade and Taya teaches us that love isn't always about rekindling old flames or holding on to what once was. Sometimes true love means making difficult choices, letting go of the past and finding peace in the present. It reminds us that life is about balance, between passion and loyalty, between dreams and reality. Ultimately, both Jade and Tear find that love is not just about grand gestures or intense emotions, but about making decisions that reflect integrity, respect, and wisdom.